It's good to be here today with all of you. Just want to talk a little bit about something that we're very proud of in West Texas. This is not just a Lubbock County project. This is as you'll see, it's a very large project involving multiple counties. It's not a part of our presentation, so I'll just point it out. We're proud too that we recently, the office received two major awards. One of them from the National Association of Counties. The office received the Best of Category Award for Criminal Justice and Public Safety nationwide. So there are only about 20 of those awards given out for different categories, and the office won for Criminal Justice and Public Safety in the entire nation. And it also won the Texas Association of Counties Best Practice Award in Criminal Justice and Public Safety as well. So obviously people around the state and the nation are recognizing this office as something very helpful. Just to get started here, most of us in the audience here will recognize this, that the way that, well, let me just start by asking a question. How many of you have had or expect to have a capital murder case occur in your county in the next 100 years? Maybe I should say it the other way. How many of you don't think you'll have one? Pretty much any of us in this room should expect that at some point over the next 100 years, you're going to have a capital murder case occur in your county. And so what I would venture to say to you is that this office will, since we were talking about that earlier, will save your county money, and you'll see why in just a second. The way that most counties currently do indigent defense and capital murder cases is to use the assigned counsel method, which is where attorneys get appointed to a case, private attorneys from the bar. So, and the statute requires that 2 attorneys be appointed as long as the state's seeking death. And those attorneys are appointed by, or selected by a regional selection committee. So each of the 9 regions, judicial regions in Texas have a committee that selects them. Obviously the cost varies on those cases depending on the complexity of the case and how long it goes, if it goes to trial or not. And estimates are that cost is anywhere from, if it pleads to life without parole pretty quickly, could cost as low as $50,000. We just had a trial that was on a change of venue in Lubbock County from Gray County, which is in the panhandle of Texas, and they estimate that case cost between $1.5 million and $2 million to try. So obviously that's a large portion of that county's entire budget for the whole year. So the cost can be a problem. The other thing too is that many of, at least in West Texas, but also in the entire state, in the rural counties, there's really a real issue with finding qualified attorneys to represent individuals in capital murder cases. So that's a difficult issue that we encountered. And then the last thing is that as we started looking at this problem, we realized that even the private counsel who were qualified to take these cases were having problems because obviously it shuts down their practice for a number of months, and then if they're having to try to stir up business again, it just becomes a real issue and a real strain on their practice. And many of the attorneys were saying, hey, we don't want to do these cases anymore. The only reason why we're staying on the list is because we feel like we have to have someone there to provide the defense. So those were sort of the issues that we came up with in 2006 when we started looking at this. And so we conducted a series of surveys over some months and visited with judges in the area and prosecutors, the defense counsel. And so we then proceeded to look at a public defender. As far as the public defender, we found that there were a number of advantages to that. First of all, and probably the most important to the funders, all of our county commissioners, were the budget predictability. It could be that in some of our counties we might not have a capital murder case for 100 years. But then when that one time it happens, it would break the county's budget. Or it could be that, for instance, in Lubbock County, we might have 2 capital murder cases that go to trial this year and then 6 next year. And so, how do the Commissioners Court actually budget to take care of that problem? And the public defender provided us a way, as you'll see, to make that budget predictability work. A second problem from the defense perspective was having, and the judge's perspective, was having quality controls over the representation. Obviously, when you have private counsel, it's pretty hard for the judges to get involved and say, well, we don't think you're representing your client very well, because then they're sort of having to involve themselves in the case. And so having a public defender allows someone to sort of oversee those cases and making sure that the attorneys that are representing them are providing them with the quality of counsel that they need. As I mentioned, the lack of availability of attorneys, obviously having a public defender fixed that problem because it gave us attorneys available at any time we needed them to accept the appointment. The other thing, too, that became an issue is, I saw it in our packet of information, the ABA principles of indigent defense are in there. Principle number 1 of that says that the indigent defense should be separate from the judiciary. It should be an independent thing. And that goes for a couple of reasons, because whenever the judiciary has to get involved in that, there becomes complications as far as overseeing that process. And one of the things that the public defender did was allowed that primary oversight to be shifted outside the judiciary to the public defender. And then the fifth thing here was that it was hands-on administration, so that they could be continually monitoring the case. They weren't having to worry about their family law case that they were working on, their civil case, their other felonies or misdemeanors. The only focus they would have would be on capital cases. And then the last advantage that we found was that it was an institutional resource, and this has been found to be true, that even attorneys that were out in the private bar that were handling these cases could go to the public defender because they would become the expert in these types of cases, and so that's all worked out very well. I don't want to say that there's all advantages. When we were looking at this, there were quickly people who reminded us of the disadvantages of doing this, and some of those are just the status quo. There's obviously fear and change all the time, and this was not something we didn't see when we were looking at this, that, well, what if, we're going to have problems and there's going to be no one left on the appointment list if there's a conflict case. I mean, all these things came up, so the status quo was a real issue. The next thing was the startup costs. Shifting from a assigned counsel to a public defender, you've got all those initial startup costs involved with starting that office, and that was a disadvantage of that we looked at. Another thing was that if we try to set up a public defender in a small county in West Texas, for instance, or anywhere else, oftentimes that's hard to do because you don't have the caseload to sustain an office. And so as you'll see, we looked at a way to deal with that, but that was obviously a disadvantage we had to look at. And then the fact may be that a county may end up spending more money in 1 year than they might otherwise spend. Let's say that Crosby County, which is a part of this region that we're in right now, they may not have that capital case for 75 years, but yet under our agreement, they're going to be paying every year to sustain the public defender. However, the point becomes, as you'll see, the year they do have that case, all of a sudden, all those years of having to pay for it are erased. But that was something that had to be addressed by the office. So I'll show you a map here on this next slide. It's kind of hard to see, but the entire purple region up there, and the top, the sort of pinkish and purple, the 7th and 9th region, the entire Panhandle and West Texas region came together. There's 85 counties in those two regions. And we talked to our regional presiding judges in both of those regions and talked to many of the district judges and prosecutors and others in the counties, and basically said, let's all come together, collaborate, and establish an office that any capital murder case that's filed in these counties will be covered by the public defender office. And so basically this area covers about a third of the state's counties and covers over 1.7 million people in population. So you can see it's pretty densely populated, but it still is a large area. But what we did was we set up this one office to handle all those cases, and I'll tell you, we invited all 85 counties to come into the region, but it was a voluntary option for them to come in. And at this point, we have 75 counties in the region. 10 of the counties decided not to come in voluntarily. And what happens is, in the process, once the office was established, the district judges still have the authority to appoint the public defender. If they want, they can still appoint from the private bar. We still have a selection list that they can choose from to appoint from. However, they then get to answer to their commissioners about why they spent that $500,000 whenever they could have used the public defender. So obviously that's always an issue. What we decided to do, Lubbock County is pretty much centrally located in this region, and so Lubbock County became the home office, but we had regional offices that we've established in Amarillo and in Midland. So we pretty much have spread the resources out over the entire region. And the way we staffed it was to have a chief public defender, 4 attorneys, and 2 investigators, 2 mitigation experts, which are required in all these cases, and 2 legal experts. The way we came up with these numbers were to look at the 10-year average of case filings in the region, the number of capital murder cases filed in the region, and then look at, basically we staffed it on a 1 attorney to 5 cases ratio, because obviously these cases are so complicated. So we had about 25 cases filed in the region per year on the average, and so that's how we staffed it based upon the attorneys. As that points out there, basically the budget, so you can see here how it worked out. During year 1, we stepped this in because obviously the day 1 they started, they didn't have 25 cases, so we stepped in the attorney funding, so that's the reason why you'll see that number is a little lower. But then the average budget is just under $1 million a year to fund this. As you heard me mention a while ago, 1 case can cost that much. So this office is funded to cover all 25 cases in the region at that amount. And it does cover all the normal costs, such as the defenders, the investigators, the mitigation experts. It does not cover costs of the attorney on appeal, costs of transcript, DNA experts, things like that that are not normal costs in every case. So the county's agreed to continue to pick up those costs and those things. Now, the way that we were able to fund this office, obviously it's $1 million. We set up a allocation plan across the counties. We wanted to make it fair to everyone, but we also wanted everyone to be participating in it. We didn't want, 1 year the county that got 10 cases all of a sudden had to pay the most and the others. So we set up a plan that stayed level from year to year. And basically what it's based upon is 50% of the amount is based upon their population and 50% is based upon their 10-year average case filings. So that number is something that's fully controlled. It's easy for them to figure out and see how we came to that number. But we also set a minimum. Some of the counties, if we look at their population, their average number of case filings, it would be $10. So we decided as a group, all the counties together, in our meetings that we would set a minimum of $1,000. We didn't feel like that would bankrupt any of the counties, but it provided an insurance policy for those small counties to look at even at that. So that's the reason why I say over 100 years. If you say that a case cost $100,000, which would be a very cheap capital murder case, if you're one of these small counties spending $1,000, it would take you 100 years of not having a case to spend more money than you would on one case. So that's kind of where we went. We also established an oversight board to look over the office because obviously you've got 85 or 75 counties at this point. You can't have the commissioner's court from every one of the 75 counties directly making policy for them, or it would be a complete nightmare. We did find out, interestingly enough, that even trying to deal with going to the commissioner's court to get approval was difficult because all the commissioner's court meet on the same day. So that was quite an interesting experience. Basically what we did was we set up this board with the regional selection committees, which were obviously very versed in the selection of capital defenders. And we also put 2 county judges and 2 commissioners from the region on the oversight board, as well as some people like Andrea Marsh, who's in the room, some of the advocacy groups around the state to provide some input to that. Their job was to hire the public defender mainly and to set policy and sort of provide oversight to the office, with the public defender then selecting the rest of the office. That actually turned out to be a really tough job because we felt, as you'll see here in a minute when I get to it, we felt like having a good chief public defender was the absolute key to the success of the office. As far as the funding to get it started, obviously this was one of the things that the task force was very instrumental in. We were able to get a grant from the task force on indigent defense for 5 years. In fact, we're still within that grant period, drawing to the near end of that in the next few years. But we, in order to fund it, provide long-term stability, we entered into interlocal agreements with the counties. Lubbock County basically is the sort of pass-through agent, fiscal agent for the grant, and so in order to provide that match, that 50% match that they provide, comes into Lubbock County. It goes into the registry, to their budget, and then Lubbock County pays all the expenses. The county then Lubbock County then provides the cash match to the task force per the grant guidelines. Lubbock County also agreed as part of this to provide the administrative overhead and office space and things like that as in-kind support. Just a couple of things I want to point out to you that are critical steps to this if you're interested in doing something along these lines. Obviously, a key to any of these types of things is oftentimes judicial leadership. We had our regional presiding judges, Judge Dean Rucker and Judge Kelly Moore. They were instrumental. We also had district judges from around the region who were instrumental in their local counties. I know Judge Hamilton's here. He was the administrative judge in Taylor County at the time. He was instrumental in getting that done in Abilene. And so we had many of our judges around the region helping with that and talking with their constituents and commissioners' courts about it. It's also important to get criminal defense bar support. You heard the last presentation talking about the defense bar having pushback on public defense. One of the things that we did before we ever talked to any of the district judges in the region or anyone else about this, once this idea kind of came up, we surveyed every single criminal defense lawyer that was on the appointment list and said, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. What are your thoughts on this? We wanted them to know that we cared what they thought about it. We may or may not stopped it because of that, but we tried to explain to them what we thought the reasoning was and tried to get their input on it, and it proved out to be very helpful in the end because we didn't have a whole lot of pushback from them. Having a dedicated oversight board is important. Our oversight board, especially that first year, spent a ton of hours looking at candidates for the public defender as well as the policies and procedures, and having them and having a diversity on that so that you have a widespread base of support was really helpful. I mentioned this a while ago, having a good chief is the key. We had the luxury of talking to many of our DAs in the region, and all of them, and I'm not exaggerating, all of them were supportive of this office, and their key point was we want someone that's good as a chief public defender. And you wouldn't think that. I mean, rationally you think, okay, well, get somebody that's bad, that way I can beat them every time. But their point was they don't like to try these cases many times either, and if you have a good chief who can hire good staff and try to keep good client control, whenever there's a case that doesn't need to be tried, but maybe there's a plea offer out there the defendant should take, that a good chief can help with that. So that was one of the things that they were really key on, and we got support from them for that. And I think the last thing is to have, that I would say, is having flexibility. Obviously, a project this big takes a lot of give and take. We tried to work with all the different counties to try to make it work for them. There were some things that we couldn't give on because it would have negatively affected the other counties, but we really tried our best to make it work as well as we could for all the counties in the region and all the different players involved. Any questions anybody might have at this point? Yes, Judge.
David, your slide indicated that a portion of the county's fee is based on the number of capital cases filed.
Yes, sir.
Is it based on the number of capital cases filed, or is it the number of capital cases that the office is appointed on, or did you use number of cases filed originally, and is it shifting to the number of appointments in the future? Just give us some more information about that.
It's currently and was historically on the number of cases filed. That was really the only objective way we could look at it, because one of the thoughts originally was how many actual death penalty trials have gone. But then that can vary from year to year, and also the public defender gets involved as soon as the case is filed, not whenever it goes to trial. So we felt like that was really the importance, was to look at that. It may be that sometime over the future we may look at how many cases they're appointed on. Hopefully those numbers will correlate pretty closely, because I'm not assuming that many of the judges are going to appoint outside of the public defender, but that's something that we'll definitely be looking at as far as the funding formula over. Once we get past this 5-year period, we'll kind of reevaluate that. Yes, Judge.
Okay. And you're only accepting appointments when the state is pursuing the death penalty, right?
Actually, they accept appointments at whatever time the judge appoints them, and it could be as early as soon as the case is filed. Many of them, they're getting calls on many cases as soon as the capital murder occurs, basically, and the magistrate sees them, and they're initiating their services as soon as that case, within hours of being called. I know there was a case in Smith County, which is a really small county in the northern panhandle. This is kind of a funny story. They had not got signed an interlocal agreement, and the capital murder occurred on Friday. On Sunday, I found out about it because I read about it in the paper, and I emailed the county judge and said, you know, I read about this case, and are y'all wanting in? And he immediately, on Sunday, called me and said, we want in now. So we let them in because nothing had happened really in the case, and on Monday morning, the public defender's office was there visiting with the client. So it's one of the things they do.
But when you find out that the state is not going to pursue the death penalty, then you file a motion to withdraw.
That's happening a lot, because they really feel like the public defender's office has looked at the cost and have really tried to focus on those cases where the death penalty is being sought. So as long as the judge and the client don't have an issue with it, they will oftentimes withdraw if the state decides not to seek death.
But as long as a capital case has been filed, then
that's where the initiation occurs.
Okay, but say for the following year or subsequent years, that is a statistic that's used in determining the county's fee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Andre? I just want to clarify. It's my understanding that until the state files for death, that you have a local counsel, and so there will be continuity of counsel when the office withdraws.
Yes, ma'am.
That's right. Will stay on.
Any other questions? And I'll be around all day if you have any. Oh, yes, Carolyn.
I just wondered if you had any statistics on how many cases you've handled, how many counties have been involved,
I should have pointed that out. I thank you for asking that question. I don't have the exact number of cases. I believe it's around 25 cases at this point that they've handled. They've tried one case to trial and actually got the death penalty on that case. Many of their cases that they've had have pled out. Many of them to as low as murder and not even life without parole. I mean, they've really been very successful in their plea negotiations. They've saved over $1 million already. We reported out one of our last reports that it was $300,000, and then there's been a trial since then. So we're looking right at $1 million that the counties have saved. The office started in January 2008, so within an 18-month period, have saved the counties in the region about $1 million already. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I'll be around if you have any other questions for me. Thanks.